Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the One's Ready podcast. We're happy you joined us today. We actually have a pretty interesting guest, and Aaron, I don't think we've actually had somebody from the Navy on yet. I know we've had Coasties on. We've had Army.
Terry Huyen is in the Navy. Are you aware of the SEAL?
That's right. I'm sorry. Sorry, Terry.
Command. I can't wait to text him and tell him that you screwed that one up. This is a Trent level intro. Continue, Peaches. This is good.
Admittedly, I wasn't on the one with Terry, but we have retired Command Master Chief Jody Fletcher on with us today. Appreciate you joining us, Jody.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Hey, do us a favor, just so that everybody doesn't have to go to Google and Wikipedia and stuff like that and find out how much of a big deal you actually are. Why don't you give us a little bit of background about what you did while you were in the Navy?
Well, I'm afraid to find out what you would actually see if you got on Wikipedia or Google or the Urban Dictionary. I might have a few entries there. Who knows?
Yeah, don't look in there. Don't. Right. That place is a hellscape. Careful.
I looked something up the other day, and it even had me shaking my head. Yeah, so my name's Jody Fletcher, and I joined the Navy in '92 and was a Special Operations Independent Duty Corpsman is what they're calling them now. It used to be FMF Recon, IDC. Might even still be that officially in the books. I don't know. But I did that for like the first 23 or 24 years of my career. And then I went the command route and, retired as a Command Master Chief. I'm a military brat. My dad was in the Navy. He was a corpsman with the Marines his entire career as well. And for those of you that don't know, the Marine Corps is technically a part of the Navy, even though they don't always like to admit it. It's the medical stuff is always provided by the Navy. And when you come in the Navy in the corpsman or medical field, you can go to schools and then kind of get earmarked and basically spend your entire career, which I did with the Marines. And, I was in the reconnaissance community, was at MARSOC, Marine Special Operations Command, when we stood up. And yeah, I guess that's good enough of an intro, maybe.
So why does the Marine Corps utilize the Navy primarily for their corpsmen?
Well, because they're actually a department of the Navy. And whenever
but I mean, so it's not like we would, it's not like Space Force, if you will, would dip into the Air Force for well, I guess they do dip in for a capability, but yeah, it's just interesting that they always have used Navy corpsmen. Huh?
Well, cool. and it's so funny because people are they'll see pictures or whatever and they're like, "Oh, you're a Marine." I was like, "No, I'm in the Navy. I'm a sailor." So I always joke and call myself a dirt sailor, and all of us FMF, sailors, because there are RPs, religious program specialists, and there are a few people that do serve with the Marines. So I was just called us dirt sailors.
So, but I mean, how unique is it for a sailor to then become the MARSOC, Command Master Chief? I mean, you were the Command Senior Enlisted for MARSOC as a Navy corpsman.
So that's not unusual in the Marine Corps setting. Each general officer has a sergeant major and a Command Master Chief when they get to that flag level. So I had a battle buddy the whole time, and that's super awesome because you're not just there by yourself. And, I worked for 8 different general officers and they were all amazing, but it's very cool to have that senior enlisted battle buddy as well, that you can just kind of, close the door and have a cup of coffee, so to speak.
Yeah. It's those officers. Am I right? Like, we feel that pain too. Sometimes you got to get away from those O's, Jody. We know exactly what that means. So,
hey man, you go to college and I don't know what happens in college, but it's something, right?
Some sort of lobotomy. Yeah, that's your third semester. Is they forget they make you forget what it's like to be on the teams. So let's go all the way back. I want to peel this bad boy all the way back to it sounds like more than 27 years of service. You were in for how long? So you went command route at 23 years. How long did you actually stay in?
29. I was just over 29 years. Yeah.
That is unreal. So going all the way back to the beginning. So your dad was a Navy corpsman, and he obviously was docked to the Marine guys that he worked with through his career. And you grew up with that around you. Did your parents influence you to go into the Navy, or was it just sort of a thing that was kind of like there that you loved and you grew up in that world and it was just a natural kind of progression for you to get in?
Probably both, Aaron. I used to think it was so cool that my dad could stop at a car accident and help people. And that always spoke to me. And the first couple years when I was younger, first couple years of high school, I wanted to be a marine biologist. And
well, in some ways you sort of were, right? you wanted to be a marine biologist, and then you ended up, being a marine biologist. That's kind of ironic.
That's true. I guess I never thought about it like that.
It's because you're not an idiot, Jody. That's why you never thought of it like that. It's because you're a smart person.
No, I'm going to start. I'm totally going to start.
You're an educated man.
You're an educated man, so you would never think something as stupid as calling a Navy doctor a marine biologist. Oh, man. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in the comments. Anyway, continue, Jody.
Yeah, so it did influence me. I was an only child, and a lot of my bigger brothers and sisters, if you will, were my dad's corpsmen, the sailors that he worked with. I grew up with those people in our house all the time. At some point we had some of them were living with us here and there, as they were moving in, moving out, whatever. And then just always the barbecues. And that, I think, had a huge influence on me. So right around that 11th grade year, I guess, is when I really decided, okay, I want to join the Navy, and, I want to go into the special operations fields. Of course, at the time it was, everything was SEALs, and I think I've said this multiple times in public, but I could not pass my screener when I went to boot camp because I was a triathlete and a cross country guy and a swimmer and all that stuff in high school, but I could not do pull-ups or push-ups to save my soul. I could run and swim like a fish. And so I had to kind of figure that out. And by the time I went to field med school, which is the one where you go to, to kind of get indoctrinated to the Marine Corps way of life, by then I had it down and I could do 20 dead hangs, all the things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they wouldn't let us screen out of there. There were some guys that came from recon to screen, and at the time you couldn't go straight there. You had to go to a hospital first. So I went to a hospital, went to Somalia. And then when I was ready to take the pipeline for us had just started officially. And it's funny, if you look at my original paperwork, it says forest recon. It's just all kinds of beat up. And it was a SEAL that was screening me. And I crushed that test. And he's like, dude, I can get you into buds like right meow. And I don't know. It's a whole longer story, but I met a recon corpsman in Somalia. And I was like, hey, what do you do? We were on a ship and they were doing some stuff. And so he told me all about it. And he's like, bro, we're like the underdogs. Nobody knows about us. And it's not because we're like super secret squirrels. We're just like the bastard children of the bastard children. But he said, you will never find a better group of people in your life. And that spoke to me. So as soon as I got back from that IA to Somalia, I found out about it and did it. Of course, this is all on paper with carbon copy paper and, no computers back then.
Right.
But, when that SEAL was like, hey, dude, I can get you in buds right now. And I was like, no, man, I think I'm going to do this recon thing. And I remember that guy to this day, and I've been in touch with him since because he kind of changed my life. He undersold it, which is actually what sold me. He was not trying to be like, oh, bro, blah, blah, blah. He was like, dude, it's a great group of dudes, but it always sucks. We don't get any money. We don't, and it was like, oh, you're speaking
nice.
Language.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
so true.
That sort of thing is that's like catnip to guys like us. Like, hey, you're going to be an underdog. Nobody's going to know what you do. We have a righteous mission, but you're just going to get just crapped on the entire time. There's a good portion of us that are like, oh no, the mission's that good. The people are that good. Let's go, baby. I'm in.
Yeah, man. And so I got back to got into the pipeline and just, it was off to the races from there. It's a 2-year, our program is 2 years. Actually, it's about 2 to 2.5 now, because when I went through, we would go to the short course. It used to be 300 F1, and we used to have PJs there. My class didn't, because I think you all had just stood up Kirkland, but I was in Fort Sam. So I was the second to last class that went through at Fort Sam before they moved to Bragg. But it was the 6-month SOCM, we called it SOMED. I still have my shirt. It's funny, from 95, right? But it was, that first 6 months. So we had SEALs, Rangers, Green Berets, of course, and we had a couple of foreign guys in our class as well. But the PJs, you all had just moved, I think, in that time.
Yeah, you're not wrong though, because I've always really liked the recon guys, and that's probably because I was kind of put through school with them, because in the 90s, and I couldn't tell you, I don't know if it was mid 90s or late 90s, but there was a big recruitment effort for combat control, and they needed people that were already combat dive, already free fall, or at least could go right to free fall, already airborne, and all that kind of stuff, and that were good people. And they did a massive recruiting effort and made the sister service transition from the Marine Corps to the Air Force really easy. So a lot of combat controllers, one of which we had on was a command master sergeant, excuse me, all came from recon, and they were all really good dudes, and they really helped set a good culture for combat control going forward, which was pretty awesome. I mean, there's well-known folks that are CCTs or retired CCTs that were recon guys. They got a really good culture over there.
PJ side too. Yeah, there was a while. Yeah, there was a while where we were just like straight up. We were like, "Hey, are you a recon Marine?" And they'd be like, "Yep." They'd be like, "Oh, you don't even have to do indoc. Come on over." I actually worked for it was hilarious. I worked for a guy for a long time that was not an indoc grad. He was a prior force recon dude, and it was funny because every once in a while you'd be like, "Well, I mean, okay, chief, but you didn't go to indoc, so whatever." And he did not find that funny, by the way. So
I'll do a little name dropping here. Did you all know Roger Sparks, Big Frog?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so he and I worked together at First Force, and then I don't know if you know Chris Kloftenegger.
Yeah, from Moffett. Yeah, he's over at Onyx now. So he runs Onyx Industries, which is a consulting company and a contracting company. And before that, he was at Moffett. He was a guard guy out at Moffett. Good guy.
Yeah, and then another guy, I won't say his name on air because I think he's doing other secret squirrel stuff, but both him and Chris. And then there's a couple others that were SARCs. We used to be called SARCs, Special Amphibious Reconnaissance Corpsmen. And I think a lot of us still identify with that. But, there's a lot of guys who have gone over to that side. I don't know if I've ever met any who have come the other way. Nobody's like, "Oh man, we've got it so good over here. I want to go."
That's how it goes.
The money spoils you. The money and equipment spoils you. I mean, nothing. I don't know if you're tracking this, Jody, but nothing but Arc'teryx touches Aaron's skin.
That's it. Because
he's a
Patagonia. Get it away from me. Unless it's got that bone frog on it, I don't want it. Give me that dead bird gang, and that is it, my dude.
What's funny is I was sewing something for my daughter when she was young, like little. My wife was like, "I need a bonnet for her for class because there was a bunch of lice going on and my daughter had long hair." So I sewed her all these like super cute bonnets, and she goes to school and she's like 4 or whatever. And all the teachers are like, "Oh, your mom made such cute bonnets," and she's like, "No, my dad made this." Because we all learned to sew, and we had sewing machine, and not even riggers. None of us were riggers, but we all learned to sew because if we wanted gear or, whatever, we had no money. So we'd have to make stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot of old recon guys are pretty good seamstresses. Don't tell anybody.
That lack of money thing is very real. And I think people don't realize it because you look at, and I'll just boil it down to the kind of the soft community, right? So Air Force, SEALs, even Green Berets get a lot of money.
Well, MARSOC now too. I've had the
MARSOC now does.
I've had the spoon in my mouth.
Historically, and in the normal Marine Corps and even the Navy it's tough. It's tough out there.
It is.
I mean, and the joke now is they're still getting hand-me-downs. And it's
Dermo's our best friend. I don't know if it's called the same thing in Air Force, but I can't tell you how much stuff.
Dumpster diving.
Yeah, man, totally. Yeah. But I think it also brings you together because it's almost like you knew, like when we all stood up MARSOC, and I was the first company from the West Coast to deploy in Alpha Company. And once you get that inject of money and you're like, "Oh, this is soft money." Right. Mm-hmm. But you came from nothing. So you're almost like Annie, and I might be dating myself, but like Orphan Annie. And all of a sudden you're living in Daddy Warbucks' house. And you're like, "Oh man, this is awesome."
This is how it is on the other side. So that gets you. So we're up to like 99. So we got
sorry.
No, it's okay. Like this is my job on the podcast. I'm the one that remembers where we like go off the trail. Like I'm the guy that's standing there. I'm like, "Hey guys, we're over here," and then we go continue on the same trail. So it's like 90. We're at 99. It sounds like. So you got through, that first. You got through SOCOM or SOCOM or whatever it is. Did you guys do the short course or the long course?
So I did the short course. That's what I was saying. I did the short course because I went to ARS at the time, which was on the East Coast. It's gone now. It's BRC. It's our recon school. And then
Mm-hmm.
I went to combat dive after that. And then I went to jump school, and then I went to SOMED, and then I went back to dive for our dive medicine portion. And then I went
Okay.
to third recon. So that takes us to 97. So I was in third
Okay.
recon for 96 to 97, and then came to the West Coast. And we can condense a lot of time there because I was at first recon battalion, well, company, then battalion. Then I was an instructor at field med school. I went to first force. Then we stood up MARSOC. Then I was an instructor again at BRC, and then finally moved to the East Coast. So by then I'm like climbing the ranks, but had done a whole bunch of deployments. And unlike a lot of military families, my girls have only moved twice because we were in California for 13 years, and then we were here. Now I had 5 or 6 different duty stations.
Right.
But for SARCs, I mean, you've got Oki, the West Coast, the East Coast, and then a couple of schools here and there, but that's kind of it. So once you get planning somewhere, you can really stay there for a really long time if you want to.
Nice. Well, let's talk about Recon a little bit, because Recon was that predecessor to MARSOC. Like, people are sort of aware kind of what MARSOC is, and MARSOC is our youngest brothers in arms. If you just look at when they stood up and opened the doors, but they had a long history of Recon before that. Can you briefly touch kind of on that Recon mission and what you guys were actually supporting, and then obviously that'll kind of like transition ourselves into what MARSOC is and how they're doing there, and I want to hit something along the way there, but let's talk that First Force Recon mission and really what the Marine Recon mission was all about.
Right. So you've got division, and the recon, the units are still out there and still doing great work. You've got the division recon asset, if you will, and that's kind of a deep reconnaissance, eyes and ears for the commanders for the landing force. And then Force Recon, which is a MEF asset, the Marine Expeditionary Force. So it's the difference between the 3-star and the 2-star there. And again, they're also capable of deep recon and also, do all the VBSS, GoPlat. They're more of a everybody's kind of a jack of all trades, but they get more of that and the direct action type mission. I went to Iraq with First Force, and we did a lot of direct action and did some, we did some classic recon missions too. I actually went on a no kidding bridge rep reconnaissance patrol where we took an engineer with us, just like they said we would in school. And we had to be very careful because he's not a reconnaissance Marine. And, and we're like patrolling right by, and it was 8 of us alone and unafraid, deep in it, kind of like patrolling by an Iraqi camp, or Al-Qaeda, anyway, I mean, and then we show up to this bridge, and this dude gets out and nerds out on his bridge stuff and does what he's got to do. And then we hightailed it out of there. And I just remember on that patrol thinking, wow, like they told us this is what happened, and here we are doing it. It was pretty wild.
Just like the instructor said,
I'm really here.
Right.
This is amazing. I did this at the at the finishing course. That's amazing. Recon. I actually, a lifetime ago, my swim coach was a recon dude. Like, he was one of the Marine, recon operators, a Force Recon guy. And it was always such an interesting mission set with me. And he was lucky enough to go in, a very, very short stint in the recon community. I think he was in for like 6 years, but had some good missions kind of at the beginning of, the war there. And, we always talked highly of it. And, the other thing I wanted to kind of question you is you're in a very unique position of, you had some time under your belt and you had some trips under your belt before September 11th, 2001. Where were you? What was your duty station when, September 11th kicked off?
I was at 1st Recon Battalion. I think we were called Battalion at the time. And I remember driving in, the TV was on in the aid station, because we'd all show up to work at the aid station. I wasn't in a platoon at the time. I'd just come back from a deployment, because I did a deployment in early 2000. And that was back when your medal was measured by how fast you could run, or, how far you could swim, and all that kind of stuff, right? Because nobody had really been to combat. There were the original Gulf War guys. And then, but really before that, you're looking at like NAM, which that's my dad's era. And it was interesting. I remember walking in, and the guys are all like sitting around the TV, and it was up in the corner, like the big actual like boxy TV.
Yeah.
We're like this, and somebody said like this plane just crashed into the towers, and it was gnarly. Of course, the whole base locked down, and I was calling my wife to try to touch base and see what was going on. And it was pretty wild. We all, of course, thought we were like leaving next week, and It didn't play out like that. I actually didn't leave. I didn't hit Iraq until 2004, because I was waiting on my orders. I already had the orders. I was just waiting on my time to transfer to field med school to be an instructor. And it was right after I left that the guys actually loaded up and went, it ended up being a few months, I think. And of course, you've got that sitting on the bench feeling, but I would never give back my time at field med school. That was one of the most rewarding tours I ever had, because you're bringing all these young corpsmen in, these sailors that are going to be serving with the Marines. And especially then, we all knew everybody was going right over. That was a super rewarding tour. And then when I got to Iraq, I remember seeing so many of those young sailors running around, which was awesome for me. They're like, whoa, so it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That we can relate to that, just because we got guys that are on the teams and they want to train, they want to deploy, they just want to continue to do the job. And then they get hit with orders to go be an instructor. And they're like, dude, how do I get out of these orders? I don't want to go be an instructor. I want to keep doing a mission. Well, something's got to feed the machine. Something's got to make, more operators. So they end up really enjoying that assignment, and then shaping what the career field looks like, and all these guys. And then they see them later on, and they love it. And they see, kind of what the roles that they played in who they are today. And I mean, and that's not just for instructors either. That's for folks going and doing staff gigs and stuff like that. It's like, dude, I don't want to do it. But yet I went and did SOCCENT and then SOCOM headquarters, and the education and experience and exposure to not just some of the programs that they're doing and the level of that they're, thinking at, but just some of those conversations that I wasn't even a part of. I was just an outsider, were enlightening. So every assignment and tour you can make, it is what you make of it.
Oh, 100%. And it opened, like you said, it really opens your aperture. And then you can bring that back. If you're in a staff tour, you can bring that back because you've seen behind the curtain. And you might, for me, it was an education in money, where money comes from and certain pots of money, all that kind of stuff. But the human element of being an instructor, and I would always try to relay that to the guys and gals that did not want to go do an instructor tour. I tried to help them understand you now have the ability to put your stamp on every single person that comes out of that program for the next 3 years or 2 years or whatever it is. And if you're complaining about the quality of the people coming out, this is your opportunity to go and, put your spin on it.
Yeah, I used to say that too. Almost it was like a speech. I should have written it down on a card or on a wall somewhere. I could have just saved myself the time. But when instructors would sign into the schoolhouse at Kirtland, I'd look at them and I go, hey, if we graduate 50 people a year, let's say we graduate 50 PJs a year, and that's a low, whatever. You're going to work here for 4 years. Our career field's only 500 people big. I'm telling you, you're going to be able to influence 50% of the career field. If you care about something and you want to make sure something is, cemented in our culture, I'm going to give you the opportunity to talk to 50% of our career field by the time you're out of here. By the time you get back to the teams, 50% of those dudes have heard your voice. Like, that's a pretty big deal. And people really don't, in the staff gig too, like Peaches, I'll just be honest with you. I heard staff gig and I got a little bit nauseous. So I had to wait because I was like, oh God, no. But it's the same sort of thing. You start working in those circles and you don't realize that even in some of those, one-off positions that might not be the most fun and they're definitely not the most tactical, but you're working in circles where you're having conversations that have true impact. And that's really cool. All right. So 2004, you got in and out of Iraq. That couldn't have been your first deployment in the GWAT. I have a feeling, but you start probably doing the same thing that we all did, which was the GWAT Roadshow. So home for a couple weeks, enough to train, and then back on the road. How was your experience with that?
Yeah, actually, that first 2004 was my first trip over, because in the GWAT, at least, because I was an instructor. Mm-hmm. I did 2 years as an instructor. So I was there from late 2002 to early 2004, something like that, whatever it was. And so, that Iraq trip was my first. Came back and then was in the cycle, like getting ready to go again. And that's when the whole MARSOC thing happened. So it was in that 2006, I think it was October of 2006 when I was not a part of Det 1. That stood up while I was at Field Med, which was the concept for MARSOC.
Mm-hmm.
And they, said, okay, MARSOC's a thing now, October 2006. I was in Alpha Company then. So we were already training, and we were your typical Force Recon footprint, which was the platoon. And then we had a trailer platoon from the conventional side. So we deployed like that. And, we went, we did some stuff down in like the Philippines and whatever, popped over there first and then went to Afghanistan. So that was my 2006, 2007 deployment. And I got lucky in the sense of not doing too many back-to-backs because I did the Force Recon back-to-back, or, that one to Iraq, came back, was Alpha Company for MARSOC. So that's all technically within the same set of orders just because we changed the name. So I did 2 combat deployments there, then was an instructor again at BRC after that one. Then came back from that deployment, was an instructor at BRC, and in 2010 is when I moved over to the East Coast.
Oh, it's got to be a good dog.
Good.
What kind of dog we working with here?
Dog on there.
She's a vicious mini schnauzer with 8 teeth. Hold on a second.
Yeah, you're good.
I knew it was going to happen.
So it's okay.
Yeah.
The my dog. I live in Las Vegas now, but when I was up in Washington, like I'd have our dog in here, and occasionally she'd get bored and just decide to hop up on me.
Yeah, the wife is gone, and my daughter's still, of course, crashed out because she's a teenager, and so I was like, I'll put her in here with me. But anyway, yeah. So after that, we went out to the East Coast to MARSOC headquarters because by then I was a senior chief, which is an E8 in the Navy. And I was doing kind of like the staff type gig there. And we were so undermanned, I was up for 9 and jumped back in a team and then picked up 9 like the first month or 2 that I was in that team. So it was myself and my partner, Sark was a second class. So I was like back to being HM2 Fletcher again. It was so awesome.
How awesome. I was going to say, how awesome. Yeah, we all heard that. And we're like, oh my God, you got to go be the junior again. How awesome was that? Like, if you need me, I'll be over here packing my ruck and doing work.
Yeah. Well, and I should say that when I left BRC, because I was still technically a short course guy, I went back to the long course. And that's so I did the second 6 months. It was really about 7 or 8 months, whatever it ended up being, as a senior chief. So I was a super senior guy going through, it was awesome. And it was a great kind of like refresher. And it was interesting because we were relearning a lot of the things that were in the short course when I went through.
Good.
Yeah. So anyway, did that. And then, I jumped back in that team, and I was older than everybody by 7 or 8 years. 7 years, I think, was the next oldest guy to me. And I was older than a lot of the other guys by double digits. So they call me, my nickname was Graybush in the team.
Yeah, of
course,
right?
well, that's one of those, that's a crazy thing too, but like not only just time, but like look at the things that you accomplished in that time. You know what I mean? So you're there, and it's 2 ends of the spectrum really. And it's funny that you brought up, Roger Sparks, but Roger and I were actually on the same INDOC team. So I failed, he passed because he's great and I'm not. But Roger, I distinctly remember having a conversation with Roger, and he was just like, yeah, man, like he's got that really funny affect to his voice where he's kind of just like super chill about it. He's like, yeah, man, these days are tough, but they're not as bad as, like getting pinned down in a valley or anything. And that blew my mind. Like he would talk about firefights and compare him to because he is he's well decorated.
Yeah.
Roger Sparks, before he ever became a PJ.
Yeah.
He was a pretty big name in the recon community for some stuff that he did. But you had to kind of occupy that space too. Like you have done the thing. These guys are hungry and chomping at the bit to get out of the long course so they can go deploy. And at that point, everybody wanted to go to Iraq and Afghanistan and go fight in GWAT. And you're just kind of like, yeah, I've been there a couple times, boys. Like, how did you share that experience with them? Or, was it like story time with Graybush over in NC or what?
It's always story time with Graybush.
Yeah.
That's what we're calling this one too, by the way. The name of this podcast is Story Time with Gray Bush.
The boys will love that. It was, yeah. I mean, I've always been, I love people. I'm a connector type of person anyway. And, you know, if somebody wants to listen or has a question or whatever, I'm more than happy to share. I'm not somebody who will be saying, you know, when something's bad, like, oh, well, you know, you should think this or think that. But I was always there. And I think that draws people to me at times because I'm just like that, you know, old guy in the corner who's like, hey, man, do you want to talk or not? It's cool. Either way, like I'm good. Yeah, so it did come up quite a bit just because things we were learning, I had actually done. And that was valuable when we're learning something. And I remember thinking when I went through the short course, oh, man, we'll never do this. I've done every single thing I've ever been trained to do with the exception of a pericardial centesis. Everything else I've done on somebody, which is pretty gnarly if you think about it.
I don't know what that is.
It's a procedure for your foot, Jared. Don't worry about it. It's
okay.
Parry means foot, like you parry a soccer ball. Okay, like cardio, you're going to be very excited because it's a hard procedure. No, it's removing
cardio. I know cardio.
Removing fluid from around the heart.
I know it has to do with the heart.
Yeah. So the heart is in a bag. Sometimes that bag fills up with fluid. And it sucks, and you have to remove that fluid. And you do it with a big needle. It is cool. Yeah, it is. The needle is huge. So.
Like Pulp Fiction, huge.
Well,
yeah, for sure.
Oh, one of those. Yeah. You want me to stick this in my heart? Oh, that's The Rock. But
yeah, listen. While we're talking about these things, it brings up like if you're not hydrated for these events, it is going to kill you. I don't know if you know this, Jody, but we actually have a partner, Hoist, that has IV level hydration. You know how hard it is to keep a patient hydrated. They actually make a sports drink. It's pre-mixed, and then they have like little powders and stuff that you can bring with you. It's fantastic. We have a code at checkout. It's one's ready at checkout, so you get a sweet deal. If you're ever looking for hydration, it's actually only one of 3 DoD-approved beverages that you're supposed to drink for hydration. It's way better than too, by the way. I don't know if you had that, but that stuff's garbage comparatively.
Super salty.
It's super salty. I'll send you some Hoist. It's awesome. You can drink it in a workout. It's fire. It's fantastic. So. Code 1's ready at checkout. You don't have to worry about it. I'll get you some. But
and that's exactly why we bring Aaron on here because those silky smooth.
Right into it. I was like, what's going on right now? This is so
right.
Awesome.
You didn't even know you were. Yeah. You didn't even know you were in an ad read, and then bang, you're in an ad, and now you're part of Team Hoist, and we can go forward and do good things together. So check it out.
I'm still not sure what to do with my hands, but you know,
it's okay. We're gonna bring it all back in. So. The long course is done, and then now is MARSOC completely stood up at this point? Like, are you working in and out of MARSOC spaces? And what was it like to stand that up? We when we do task orgs and we have like reorganizations inside of ASOC, sometimes a flight, like a new flight structure, will like completely just kill everybody. They're like, what are we supposed to be doing? Gosh. Who am I talking to? What am I doing? I imagine setting up an entire command. Or what is it, a brigade level for you guys? That has to be a huge move.
It was interesting because when I was at First Force, our aid station was still 3 or 4 barracks rooms like linked together. That was how we lived. I can't tell you how many. They say don't do barracks medicine, right? I'm like, our aid station is barracks. What do you want?
Yeah,
right. And so when we came back, we were 1st Marine Special Operations Battalion on the West Coast. And the East Coast is where the Death Star was. So 2nd and 3rd Marine Special Operations Battalion were over there. And they had actually built a, like a big building, that's what we called the Death Star. So I moved over there, and that was very new and unique to me because you've got this massive building, super nice. I mean, beautiful. And all the people that are running around in there that came from all walks of life. Because MARSOC was stood up on the backs of the reconnaissance community. And the reconnaissance community kind of suffered to some degree, especially on the corpsman side for it, because we were already undermanned. And then this big thing stood up with the same requirement for the SARCs, for the medical people, but it more than doubled. I think it almost tripled. And we barely had enough to cover the recon units. So it was a hot mess. And the one thing I will say about the Marines with the medical stuff is, and my dad complained about it, and I'm sure the people before him complained about it, and I'm sure people 20 years from now, the Marines, when they plan, even though we've been with them forever. They're always like building all their plans, and then the lone sailor in the room will raise their hand and be like, "Hey, what about the corpsman?" They're like, "Oh man, we forgot about that." And that's what happened with the MARSOC. And we even got proactive and tried to build something to send to them, like, this is what's going to be needed. And so we were way behind the power curve medically with personnel, just because you can't. It's a 2.5-year pipeline. You can't just like pop them out, and the schools can only handle so much. I mean, it was a hot mess, and still to this day, it's getting better, but it was a lot.
So what is the people are 100% interested. We get this all the time, and a lot of times we try to just defer, be like, hey, it's kind of not our lane or whatever. But what is the actual pipeline? I think you guys are going by SODIC now. Is that the entire overarching name for? Yeah,
Special Operations Independent Duty Corpsman. And it's, if you have not been to Field Med, so you go to boot camp, core school, and then core school, and then Field Med. Field Med is the Field Medical Training Battalion. It's basic, trauma, TTRIC, and basic Marine Corps stuff, like learning to, not call the gunny big sarge and recognize rank and stuff like that. Things that will get your head bitten off. And then just how to live in the field with the Marines. That's where all the conventional folks go. So that's technically the first school, though most people have already been to it. And then after that, you go to BRC, which is now only in Pendleton, and it's basic reconnaissance course. That's, I think it's 3.5 months now. And it's all the land warfare and communications. They do some shooting and a lot of amphib stuff, but not subsurface. So it's all, scout swimming, working with Zodiacs, over the horizon, navigation, nautical navigation, all that stuff. And then you go to Marine Combatant Dive School, which is our combat dive school. It's, I think, 2.5 months also, something like that, 3 months. And that's same as every other combat dive school, right? In fact, it's all the same. I don't know if you guys know this, but the Navy is the one who puts out the standards for all dive schools, which makes sense, right? I mean, it's the Navy.
Yep. So
you go to that. And then after that is I think it's a 3-week course that's just medicine specific. And that's where the corpsmen get all the hyperbaric medicine stuff. You go to jump school. And I think SEER school is included now as well. It was not when I was going through, but I think that's a part of it as well. Free fall is later if you go. It's team funded, but that's it. Oh, and of course, 18 Delta. I didn't kind of forgot that one. So that's where that whole 2.5 years comes in, because that school just by itself is a year. And that's a big change just in the last couple of years. The Navy sees IDCs, you have to be an E5 or above. Well, we're now trying to recruit street to fleet. So it's impossible to have somebody as an E5 if you've recruited them off the street. And I was a part of this. We had a couple of people coming through that we sent as E4s. And then what we did was we built kind of this mentor program for them, so that if you're an E4, no kidding, IDC, when you're in garrison, you're practicing with a mentor IDC. And when you go downrange, it's a free game. You can do, unsupervised, right? But we would do that until they would make E5. That kind of satisfied the Navy. But now that's become a program of record, so they can go through street to fleet. So you might get an IDC out of the program that's still, most of them will be E4 just because of meritorious promotion or whatever after graduating the school. But I've actually seen one E3 get all the way through.
Did you guys have any growing pains with the street to fleet thing? Because I know, we, at least in the Air Force, we have always kind of had the street to fleet. We have a lot of cross trainees and sister service as well, which helps. But, to go to SEALs, you used to have another job, and then you go to that. And then they started the 18 X-ray program for the 18 series guys. I think that was 2005. Don't quote me on that, the ODA dudes out there, but, and there were some growing pains because, they had this culture of, they were already well established, folks that had been in the Army, Navy for a long time. And then now you got these kids that think that, whether or not they think they're entitled to it or not, but it's just, there was definitely a cultural shift, for them. Did you guys experience the same
They
kind of thing?
are experiencing it. Not yet. So they're deep in the throes of it. And
they're still doing it.
Here's the other thing. the Navy and the Marines so at least you can say, well, it's the Air Force's problem. The thing that we faced from a behind the curtain, behind the scenes type of problem, and it's still there, is who's paying for all this? The Marines say the Navy should pay for it because they're sailors. The sailors, the Navy says the Marines should pay for stuff because you're getting them. And it's it's like being the unwanted child of divorced parents who hate each other sometimes. I mean, it gets crazy. And then, so yes, that's a part of it. I feel like our screening process is pretty good as far as getting people, good quality people through. The SARCs, SOIDCs, whatever that are coming out, I think are just, I'm one of these guys. So I hate hearing people say, oh, it's, I used to go to school uphill both ways in the snow, barefoot, like every generation brings something different. And I can say that, yes, as an instructor at BRC, there was objective data that the young folks coming in were not as most, and I'm generalizing, were not as strong and fast as my generation.
Mm-hmm.
They had the same desire, but I think it's because a lot of them didn't grow up where I was not allowed to come in the house during the day. My dad put a water fountain on the spigot outside, and that's where I got a drink. Right? And so I grew up.
Hose.
Yes. Oh, no, we got fancy. Yeah, he found like an actual little water fountain that went where the hose goes. And so, I've said this before on air, I think that you've got the same mentality in young people where they're playing war just like we did. But our version of war was shooting each other in the face with BB guns or slingshots or throwing rocks at each other outside running around. And theirs is predominantly online. And it gives them the advantage I remember when drones first came in and I was like, whoa, right? And these young people are just flying them around like it's second nature. It would have taken me a 2-week class to learn to fly that stupid thing. I'd probably still crash it. So they're very up and attuned to all of that. Whereas my generation was, I've got calluses on my knuckles because I drag them around, right? Like you put something on my heavy on my back. And even when I first came in, I could already carry it because I've been used to doing that. So the mentality is there. It's just a physicality that is a little different. Of course, folks that play sports in school tend to do better because, they're used to that physicality. But that's the biggest difference, I think, in the young folks coming in nowadays. It's not the mindset. It's just like, oh, hey, this. And I literally heard young Marines, never sailors, but I heard a couple of young Marines when I was at BRC say it didn't look this hard in the video games.
Nice.
Jeez. As a senior NCO, and that kind of stuff, like I struggle with that too. But I mean, even as a parent right now, I've got a 15-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I heard you, Jody. I heard you say that you've got a teenager, and I know Aaron's got teenagers as well. So it is a struggle. But having, and I got to be careful to make sure I don't say anything classified. But at where I'm at now, like I work with, anything from JTACs to A-10s to space folks to cyber folks, and seeing all the different mentalities, capabilities, who they're recruiting, how they're operating is mind blowing. And you can see the not just the generational difference, but the kind of mindset difference between all of them. And they're all doing fantastic and amazing things and incredible. Like I was just last week, I was in a brief with 2 different briefs with, space and cyber. And I'm like, okay, well, like I'm here to get an education. Like, let's do this. And I'm blown away. Like these guys are like, oh yeah, we were just writing this code and then we had to script this. And I'm like, dude, you guys are talking a whole nother level that I have no idea. But I come talk to my son about it, and he's like, yeah, dude, you just,
like, it's not,
not dude, Dad, you just do this and this. And I'm like,
I'm picturing, I always, anytime anybody ever does that, I picture like the classic, like dudes in like really dark rooms and they're like hacker voice. I'm in, like that ain't how it is, homie. It's usually just some dude on his couch, like with one window open and he's got like, he's watching ESPN in the background or he's watching whatever movie. He's like, oh yeah. And he's just decimating somebody with non-kinetic effects. But, we see the same thing on our side, to be honest with you, Jody. It's a cultural change and so hot right now to talk about Gen Z and how it is that you talk to them. But oddly enough, they're just humans. They grew up in the same world, in the same universe that you did. So you have a lot more in common with them than you would think. So as you were transitioning to that command, right, you were making the jump between us and them. Like, your GWAT time was over. You were no longer allowed to be the junior Jody Fletcher. You had to actually like grow up and put on a uniform every day and talk about haircuts. First of all, what was your ism? Was it grass? Was it haircuts? What was your thing? Showing up on time?
My ism was be a good human.
Was what?
Be a good human.
Yeah.
Nice.
Like, don't treat each other like dirt.
Wow. Crazy. A basic level of human respect.
That's mind blowing, right?
I hated to see
right?
like operators talking trash about the admin folks. Like, that drove me crazy.
Oh yeah.
You know, you're not. Why would you talk trash about the person who pays you? Like, of all
Absolutely.
people, you should be super cool to them.
So when you were were you in MARSOC at that point? Was that your first real command gig when you kind of crossed that bridge?
Yeah, I came back from that deployment and I was a Master Chief, and I rolled into the Command Master Chief position there because, and I think it's still, well, it is still that way. We try to have former SOIDCs. They've all been. I was number 3, and I think they're up to number 5 right now, or 6, and everybody's been a recon corpsman, a SARC, or a SOIDC.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then what were the challenges there? Like, I know that there's a million challenges every single day that I could list out, even at my position. That's nowhere near command level stuff. But, for you, what were those things, those big rocks that you were trying to break for the community?
My biggest rock was tribalism. And that's what I was just talking about. I hated to see people, this tribe versus that tribe. And one day it hit me, and I don't know where it came from. I think somebody said something about the tip of the spear, and they were talking about operators. And it just hit me, and I've used it ever since then, especially when I'm talking to military folks. The tip of the spear is not lethal by itself, right? It's sharp, but if I were just to give you a tip of a spear, you might scratch somebody up or poke their eye out or something. You're going to have a really hard time killing them. It gains its strength when it's attached to a very solid staff, and that weapon becomes lethal when everybody's got a hand on it and they're pushing it forward. So whenever people would check in, all the sailors used to have to come visit me when they would check in. And normally, historically, it's like you go up to the CMC's office, you're in your dress blues, you sit there for 5 minutes, it's super awkward, and then you leave. Well, I was lucky. MARSOC is not huge. It's only a few thousand people. And then the sailor component, any Marine component has about 10% of the population generally are sailors. So I had, 200 to 300 sailors. So I had the luxury of being able to meet with everybody who checked in for a pretty good period of time. And at the time I was ultra running. So I just wanted to be outside and get my runs in also. So they would schedule 30-minute runs with me. That's what it turned into. And in those 30 minutes, we had to walk sometimes. It just depended, it wasn't a race. But what it was, you were stuck with me for 30 minutes. And that gave me the ability to talk to that sailor, regardless of what they were doing in the command, about the culture that I was trying to create. And that culture was one of appreciation. And to appreciate people, you have to first understand them. So my biggest challenge was getting, and I'll just generalize like the operators to understand the administrators and the logisticians and everybody. Because once you understand, wow, that person works, A, they're a good human. B, they work really hard at what they do. C, I wouldn't want that job, just like they wouldn't want my job. Then you gain this appreciation. And once they learn to appreciate each other, everybody starts coming together as a team. And now you've got like the whole spear approach where somebody, says, hey man, thanks for fixing our trucks. They're running great. Or thanks for fixing my pay. And the story I always share is I went into one of the administrators' spaces one day, and there was a young lady there, and she was in her utilities, and she was dirty, and she was an administrator. So she was rarely dirty, right, in her uniform, but she had a giant smile on her face. And I was like, hey, what's going on? And she's like, Master Chief, I'm having the best day. And I was like, cool. Tell me about it. Long story short, some of the guys had come in and she helped them with their pay. Something, because what the big perception with the operators, right, is they're a bunch of cowboys and this and that. But what people don't understand is you're training so much that when you are in garrison, you don't have a lot of time to get stuff fixed. You're constantly, back out the door. So she had helped these dudes. And one day they were like, "Hey, we're going to the machine gun range. You want to go and shoot guns?" And she was like, "Yeah."
I do want to go shoot guns.
Right. And so that was that appreciation where they were showing appreciation for what she had done for them and appreciating the work because they understood her. And then she got to go do something that she probably would not normally get to go do. And when you build that type of culture, I say, you've got it when people don't want to leave, regardless of their job. They get their set of orders and they're banging on your door like, "Master Chief, I don't want to leave." And I would always tell them, take what you've learned here and try to spread it somewhere else. So tribalism, Aaron, to answer your question, was my big thing. And I told everybody, I don't know if you ever read Legacy, but and I'll be politically correct, but chapter 6 is no Richards. Yep. So if you're reading Legacy, look at chapter 6. And before I ever read that book, that was what I was talking to everybody about on the run, was don't be a jerk. Just because you're an operator doesn't mean you get to be a jerk to somebody else. And just because you're an administrator, don't assume you know what the other people are doing, the operators. And once you create that environment, then you break those walls down.
There's actually a really good book on that called Everybody Matters by Bob Chapman. And it talks about like, hey, when you're looking at that and you're working with people and you're looking at people, understand that you're talking to somebody's husband, somebody's wife, somebody's son or daughter. And would you want somebody treating your son or your daughter or your wife, husband or whatever like that? And then when you can kind of look at that, you go, oh, well, maybe not. And then Jody, back to your comment about, hey, whether it's the operators or not, like the whole tip of the spear thing changes. Like it's an ebb and flow, right? So if as we're entering into September here pretty soon and we're ending the fiscal year, so folks that don't know that out there, like we don't go on a calendar year when it comes to money, we go on a fiscal year. So the end of September, well, August, September is a big time. So we got to make sure that all our numbers and everything are right. But that last week of September, who is the most important people within the organization? The resource advisors, or at least that's what we call them. I don't know who
spend that money, homie.
That's right.
Yeah, right. Exactly. They are the most important people, right? So the area of focus should be on them, and that changes as you're going through. But man, treating everybody right, like that hits home with me. I mean, I can think of several times, and I know Aaron can too, where you roll in and whether it's the supply sergeant or something like that, it's like, man, hey, can you talk to this person? Because they came in here barking orders at me saying I need this, and they think that's like, we can handle that real fast.
Every week, baby. What do the operators do? I got it.
Yeah, and I was talking to a technology company the other day. I was speaking, and I was talking to them a little bit about the tip of the spear, but they were, it was back and forth. And as we were talking, they were saying kind of the same thing. Well, this week, this department is super important. And this week, that department is super important. I was like, so you guys aren't a spear, you're a ninja star. Right? At any given moment, one of the points is going to be the most important, but everybody needs to be working together as it spins until it hits.
Yeah, fantastic. The old ninja star of productivity.
Like ninja star.
That gets it gives us
don't go ninja nobody now.
So where you are now. So you had your time in command. When did you actually retire?
I retired about a year ago. So I think it was June of 21.
Fantastic. That explains the beard, because if I was in the Navy working for the Marines for 29 years, I would also grow a beard out immediately, and I would never shave again. The shaving on the weekends thing is always crazy. It always cracks me up about my Marine Corps brothers is you will watch somebody walk up to a guy Sunday afternoon and go, "Hey, Marine, did you shave today?" And that is a pointed conversation right there.
It's usually a one-way conversation.
It is, usually that answer is usually I'm going right now, Gunny, and then they go shave.
And it could have a devil dog.
You're going to get a double D.
Hey, devil.
Yeah.
So you started your transition.
I don't think I've ever said it on the podcast. I was going to say I got devil dog at Camp Lejeune out in the PX there. Yeah. I was dressed I went in wearing shorts and flip-flops. I'm an Air Force guy.
Yeah.
I'm TDY. I don't know. And somebody behind me was, hey, Marine, and then finally, hey, devil dog, really got that.
That's basic.
And I turned around because I didn't know that he was talking to me. And I turned around. I'm like, oh, are you talking to me? And he's like, okay, you're not a Marine.
Well, that's the
carry on. I was like,
that's the verbal escalation of force. And we as corpsmen loved like, hey, Marine. And of course you're ignoring them, knowing they're talking to you. Hey, devil dog. And you turn around and you'd be here. Yeah. The Cuddy would always be like, damn it, Doc. And you're like, gotcha.
That's the coolest thing ever. It's like,
that's a real thing.
And ain't nobody messing with the doc. Like the doc is a highly protected asset. Like I'll tell you what, there is no way that, and this is a military axiom. There is no way to piss a fighting force off more than if you target their doc. If you shoot at the doc, like you're gonna catch a whole can of whoop ass from that because you're the lifeline. You're the doc. You're that guy. What are you getting after now, Jody? Like you got a lifetime of accomplishments behind you. I have a feeling you're not the type of person that's going to rest on your laurels very long. So what are you getting into now?
I'm surfing as much as I can, but I live in North Carolina, so it's meager at best. But I'm also willing to gravel, so I do surf in next to nothing, spending time with my girls. And then professionally, I got into executive coaching and consulting and keynote speaking because that's what kept me in the military that last 2 tours. Because when I officially went the command route, I mean, I lost a ton of money because I lost all my special pays when I went on the conventional side. But I did not, and this is the thing I learned in MARSOC, I did not anticipate loving that job as much as I did. Like the coaching, the mentoring, the leadership stuff. So it kept me in, all the way up there to the end. And I'm just kind of doing that now, but in a corporate setting. And it's funny because before we logged on, I've been writing. Finally my book has come to me in my head. I'm going to call it Good Humans Make Great Leaders. And the first half is about being a good human and what that takes. And the second half is how that translates into being a good leader. And I've been saying it out loud so that I'm held accountable for sitting down and writing. But my goal is to do it in my voice, just how I talk, a lot of like stupid little side notes and stories and whatever. I want it to be fun to read, but I want it to have the same voice that we all use when we're leading people. You sit down and you talk to somebody on the human level. You're like, hey, bro, that was not cool, man. Why'd you do that? And now you piss this person off and whatever. So yeah, just doing that. Coaching. I love coaching. I've got a few C-suite folks that are really fun because the organization I left had 45,000 people. And, I was working for a 3-star general, sitting in meetings I probably had no business sitting in with, heads of state of our country and other countries and all this stuff. So I don't care if you're a CEO for company X. And I think that's why people are drawn to me as a coach, because I'm very candid and not intimidated by your position. And I work specifically with people that want to grow. Either they're good leaders and they want to be great leaders, or they're not good leaders, but they're good humans and they want to be great leaders. A lot of the stuff that I do is centered around self-awareness and how knowing yourself is going to make you a better leader. I used to always say I was kind of a hippie with a gun anyway, and Roger and I would have a lot of great talks. I could always hear his voice, but so just a lot of that type of stuff. Trying to do my best to help make people treat each other better and then lead better.
Yeah. Well,
you're going to have to let us know when that book comes out, because we'll definitely have you on and promote the hell out of that book, because that is something that all of us can relate to. Like, just treat people good, treat people well, treat people how they want to be treated.
Yeah,
just be a good human.
The moments that I'm lucky enough to be remembered, I want it not to be like for the position I held or what I did, but for the person that I was. And that's what people remember.
Okay. So,
yep.
The teams that have to get down there, and then these are, for the people listening, I would be remiss if I didn't try to steal some of your time. I assume you get paid for your time, but you came on here for free, and now I'm just going to exploit that. So from your optic now, with all of your experience, right, one of the big questions we get when people get together down there is they have no idea, we say we want to see teamwork. when we get there. It's one of the attributes that we assess for at assessment selection. We want to see teamwork, and we want to see you be a leader at your level. And the answer we always get is, I don't know how to be a team player at this level. It's an individual event, really. And then the number two is, well, how can I be a leader if I'm not the one that's actually leading the thing? What advice would you give in that teamwork? Because teamwork and leadership play off of one another, just like that ninja star you were talking about. Sometimes, one of those points is going to be the action end of it, but sometimes, you're just the rotating of it. So, kind of given that weird scenario, bringing people in right off the street, throwing them into this crucible sort of event, what kind of advice do you have for those people?
Self-awareness is where it starts, and understanding what you bring to the mix. And I always use the analogy like you are a weather system. So understanding what your weather system brings, and from a leadership perspective, if you're lightning and thunder, people are going to run and hide from you because it's raining, right? Or you're going to drown everything out. But really, that self-awareness piece, and that's going to help you tamp down your ego. I was talking to a young Marine one time at the dry cleaning thing, and I was with my Sergeant Major battle buddy, and he started, of course, talking to the young, I think he was a sergeant, and just like sergeants major do, right? They're like, hey, Marine, what are you doing? How are you doing today? And this young guy's like, oh, I'm going to ANS to MARSOC, right? To take ANS. And he's like, oh, you should talk to Master Chief. He just came from there, right? And so this guy immediately rolls into telling me how fast he can swim, how, what a great runner he is. It was me. And I don't know if I just became aware of this term the other day on the Google. I found it. It's called the 9th letter leader. The 9th letter in the alphabet is I. So it's I, me, and mine. And those pronouns project individualism, selfishness, ownership, right? And nobody likes. I argue that there's a positive side to I. And it's the I, like I know myself, what my core values are, what I stand for, all of that, right? So this young sergeant was telling me all the physical attributes that he thought he needed to get through ANS. And I let him go on for a little while. And I said, all right, brother, that's awesome. I said, but what are you bringing to the team? And he was really caught on his heels. And I said, everybody who's there can run far and swim fast and do lots of push-ups and pull-ups. That's why they're there. What are you bringing to the team? What are you able to put yourself down? And I don't mean down, I mean step down and take a support role when somebody else is better at something than you. And then how are you going to shift gears into the leadership role when you're the one that's better at something? That's what people are looking for in these assessment and selection, or just in the world in general, is for me to say, hey, I'm better at swimming than you are, and I know you're struggling, so let's go to the pool on the weekend and I'll help you with your stroke so you can get better. Or let me carry a little extra weight because I'm bigger than you are and we all have to get through this together. That's the piece. It's the human, again, it's the human element. It's not the pounding on your chest, like who's winning the race. And I know from personal experience, and this is what I told them, I said, they're going to be watching how you interact as a leader and a team member, which are symbiotic or synonymous or what, a good leader is a great follower. And a great follower is a good leader. And you've got to constantly be shifting gears into which role you need to be playing at that time. In an environment where there's a bunch of alphas, male and female, right? Everybody's bidding for that, to be the best. The best is really the one who knows when and where they need to support others because A, they're not as good at it, or B, they're better at it. And it's time for me to provide that support.
I don't know that there's a better way to close that out.
Absolutely.
I really don't.
Absolute home run.
Yeah, I got nothing. I got nothing to add because I couldn't agree. I really couldn't agree more. And that's actually the way I think about it. And I know Aaron thinks the same way, and as well as Trent. So, trying to impart that on folks that are coming in, because again, we get the same kind of questions, and it's like, okay, well, how do you define that? How do you articulate that and put that into practice? And it's tough. So, no, that's great. Jody, appreciate you coming on. You've got an incredible career and impacted. You said your last command was 45,000 people. So I can only imagine through a career of 29 years, how many people that you have influenced and lives you have changed and impacted. So thanks for everything that you've done while you're in the Navy, and thanks for everything that you're doing now, even though it's a whole bunch of surfing, but at least you're spending more time with your girls and your family. So appreciate you coming on. And we'll definitely, once that book comes out, and now you've said it,
out there
you've got to do it.
This is the first time I've said it on air.
We'll have you back on to promote it.
Oh.
Well,
Nice.
you know, now you're able to get, I mean, it's one of the things we've told folks that are coming in, like, hey, tell everybody that you're going to go be a PJ or controller or whatever it's going to be. Tell everybody. And then, you know, if you're on social media, post on social media about it, because you're going to get asked about it, and you can't come back and go, oh, well, actually, I quit, or usually the other excuses or other excuses. But no, but definitely really enjoyed the conversation. Always enjoy these kind of conversations. So for everybody that's out there, don't forget to like and subscribe, and then leave us a comment. We're really close to 1,000 reviews, so like to get there here in the next day or two. That'd be amazing. So everybody out there,
that'd be cool.
What's that?
It's a review. You leave a review for every restaurant.
I mean, that'd be
maybe
cool of you.
for a podcast. That actually does help. Maybe it's our podcast. Maybe it's 5 stars.
Yeah.
Maybe talk about how great we are. You know, up to you.
Well, and I appreciate you guys having me on, man. It's been awesome.
All right, Jody. No, absolutely.
Thanks so much.
for coming.
For your service.
All right, everybody. Light up.
All right.